Hi, this is Robert Corradini. I'm the manager of Alliance Engineering here at Nutanix, and today we're talking about Microsoft solutions on Nutanix. What are the challenges in today's Microsoft data center? Well, typically there's over-provisioning for performance, there's complex data protection and disaster recovery techniques, and it's difficult to scale as we grow because it's typically a lot of forklift upgrades. Infrastructure silos remain even after the initial wave of virtualization. This is where web scale comes in. Nutanix can really eliminate that by these infrastructure silos by leveraging its shared nothing scale out approach. Applications and VMs are served directly from local storage, including SSDs for fast performance, and 50 to 100% performance and SQL reporting are not uncommon when customers move to Nutanix from traditional server networking storage. This allows multiple applications to reside on the same virtual computing platform. It gives you the ability to really consolidate down to one platform and have linear scaling. And then you also have the ability to automate VM Caliber and deploy affordable DR solutions because that stuff is built into Nutanix. And then you also cut your operational complexity costs because essentially you're consolidating down to one platform. Scale. Let's talk a little bit about web scale and Microsoft SQL specifically. The Nutanix platform is really built for multiple workloads. It supports multiple I/O footprints required by workloads and use cases. Platforms can be essentially support random I/O footprint for VDI, or random or sequential I/O, natural for SQL Server. Sequential I/O requirements are the general server workloads simultaneously while eliminating the noisy neighbor problem. So in the case of SQL, it comes down to two scenarios. You have transactional databases. The big things with that is you want to minimize the latency, which is very important. And because the Nutanix platform has local storage controller model, the I/O requests do not go over the network, which reduces latency. In a traditional network, the network lies in the data path where it implies additional latency. Further, a Nutanix platform has server-attached flash and in-memory and SSD caches so that the indexes and heavy access files can reside on SSD for accelerated performance, and less access files can reside on HDD tier. I/O and sequential I/O workloads equally work well. Random I/O and the nature of a database data file is handled with the flash tier. The latency sensitive sequential nature of log files, temp DB, are handled on the SSD tier, and standard sequential data can be facilitated to the HDD tier. Essentially, this is called automatic tiering. And then the second scenario around where you have with SQL databases is analytical databases. These databases include a lot of reads, workloads, and batch reporting insertion. Nutanix provides basically a lot of local read I/O for these reports from the local controller, which accelerates performance of the query and stores procedures leading to faster reporting times for the end user. It gives you more than ample sequential and random throughput. And if you need to write like a load terabyte worth of data, or you need to read a gigabyte worth of data, the platform can handle it. As a quantity of data will grow over time, and with your will need to scale compute and storage infrastructure, Nutanix simplifies this scaling with the portfolio of the turnkey applications, and you can always choose from based on what your needs are. Let's talk a little bit about deploying Exchange on Nutanix and some of the misconceptions around that. The advantages of deploying Exchange on Nutanix is where you have the decreased operational complexity. Typically, and like we previously spoke, is that typically Exchange is done on physical hardware or even on 3-tier hardware. There's a lot of complexity there. Plus, there's complexity with backing up this platform. Also, when you go with Nutanix, you have a decreased of resulting in an extended outage. Typically, when you lose a DAG or a member of a DAG, database availability group in Exchange, you typically are kind of running around. Where in Nutanix world, if you lose something, it's very transparent to the application. And what translates that over to is that HDD and SDDD failures are transparent to the application, meaning no DAG failover and no need to wake up in the middle of the night or reseed the database. Another great thing that you can do is that compression. Compression is not supported in the Microsoft spec, but that's actually at the Windows abstraction layer. Where we talk about compression is at our storage fabric layer, and typically we can get 1 to 3, 1 to 5 compression depending on the type of we'll say hot data. Now, with deploying Exchange on Nutanix, you also have cost effectiveness. You have a standard platform, which are the most cost effective than point solutions. You can reduce the number of DAG copies due to the underlying data protection, which we haven't talked about yet. Now, let me explain this. So currently, Nutanix has something called RF2. And what that really means is that we write two copies of that data. One, where the initial copy where it's actual live, and a second copy throughout the cluster. And if any kind of disaster hits, whether it's a node or individual drive, we can actually reconstruct that data in pretty short order because of RF2. So you have essentially built-in resilience. When you have that underlying data protection like that, on top of being able to do snapshotting and replicating snapshots to other clusters, you can reduce the number of DAG copies because of that underlying data protection. And you can also reduce the number of mailbox servers and licenses that are required because, again, you can fit more density and you can scale up an Exchange environment on Nutanix, also achieving that storage requirements that you need. And then big thing with Exchange is high availability, self-healing, regardless of drive or node failure. And I'd mentioned this before. Typically when you have a failure in a traditional Exchange environment, whether it's a SAN environment or even physical hardware, typically any kind of failures in those hardwares trigger a DAG failover. They're very sensitive. In the case of Nutanix, we have self-healing and essentially very transparent to the application. It wouldn't trigger a DAG failover. Business would go along until the next day you came in and popped that drive in. You want to be able to can replace faulty hardware knowing that resilience is automatically restored. And let's talk about Cloud Platform System. Cloud Platform System actually really came out of Windows Azure Pack. If you don't know, Windows Azure Pack is essentially Microsoft's self-service, on-premise self-service solution for like VMs. It's a very small subset of what you would do in Azure. Cloud Platform System gives you the ability to basically put out Windows Azure Pack in a very short order. Building out Windows Azure Pack does take a little bit of time and effort. It does have a lot of moving parts where if you want to use something like Cloud Platform System on Nutanix, you can actually do this automated deployment and have it done in hours instead of weeks. Now, be aware now with CPS this is a big one around Microsoft sellers. Microsoft sellers meet 20% of their scorecard around retiring software quota like WinServer, System Center, BizApps, but they drive Azure sales and consumption. And Windows Azure Pack is part of that Azure consumption and sales. And also, they drive more Hyper-V adoption. That's very important, which is obviously part of Azure Pack as a requirement. Again, it's always beat VMware and increase competitive wins. Let's talk about the next, Azure Stack. It's the big question that everybody asks, when is Nutanix going to be an Azure Stack partner? Well, we're currently not a partner, and there's a main reason for that. Azure Stack has a requirement on something called Microsoft Storage Spaces Direct. Storage Spaces Direct essentially is Microsoft's hyper-converged solution. It's a very first-generation solution that has not a lot of feet to it. We'll say not a lot of legs to it, but it is a requirement to run Azure Stack, which basically has excluded all the hyper-converged vendors at this point in time. On top of that, Azure Stack is still in beta. I believe it's technical preview 3 at this point in time, and it's slated to be end of the year. A couple things to know about Azure Stack, that it is a sealed system. Even in the case of storage spaces right now, it's still something we couldn't jump into until they started to open the doors with Azure Stack. Again, this is all about Microsoft most likely giving a runway to their storage spaces solution. We would like to be part of the Azure Stack story, but again, we have another story that we can do very much well with self-service and especially with our recent releases of AOS 5. Let's talk about something else that we can do with Azure, and that's Cloud Connect. Cloud Connect to Azure is essentially the ability to replicate your snapshots, your local snapshots on cluster to Azure in the cloud. And how that's done is pretty easily. Essentially, we create a CVM or a one node storage controller on blob storage. Actually, it replicates very similar to how we do cluster to cluster replication. So you can back up to the cloud and it works no matter whether you have VMware, Hyper-V, or even AHV. Now, again, this is only backup. You can restore, but this is not full-fledged DR yet. There is a roadmap to eventually have DR where you can actually flip over and then workload portability down the line. But right now it's backup only. A little summary on our programs and certifications. We are Microsoft Private Cloud Fast Track validated, which means that our hardware been past the suitability test of what it means to have a private cloud on premise. The very same standards that you would have for running Azure in their data centers. We have SVVP cert for Windows 2012 R2 and 2012 on AHV. We have an ESRP on Exchange 2010, and we'll have that on 2016 in short order. We do support Windows 2012 and Windows 2012 R2, and we are certified by Microsoft on that. Nutanix Hyper-V also supports 2012, which is essentially Hyper-V solution of 2012. Just a little bit about our support and how we support customers. We have a premier support agreement and we have a TAM assigned. So if there's issues that our normal SRE team cannot handle, we usually escalate that up to Microsoft, and we can get answers in pretty short order. Some cool things that we offer around Microsoft, especially in the Microsoft ecosystem and Hyper-V. We support, obviously, System Center 2012 R2, specifically SCVMM. The SCVMM plugin currently is 2012 R2. 2016 is coming very, very short down the line, but that's done via an SMSI plugin, and in 2016 it's going to be done a little bit differently. Can't disclose that just yet. And then we also have a SCOM plugin, so you can actually pull those Nutanix metrics right into SCOM. A couple other things to note is that we are a global MTC partner, and by the way, we're also a Microsoft Gold partner in Cloud and Data Center. A global MTC partner means is that we have Microsoft has these data centers, or we'll say executive briefing centers, where you can bring your partners and you can demo the equipment. And we currently have block in these different data centers like Paris, UK, Irvine, Boston, New York, Toronto, Atlanta, and Tokyo. If you have a need, you can always use these and contact the Alliances team, and we can put you in touch with those centers. We also have Microsoft Partner Network. And we have a gold in management virtualization competency, which I had mentioned previously, and that was something that we recently just achieved. We've been silver for the last 4 years. And then we have an excellent executive alignment between the CEOs of Microsoft and Nutanix. Let's talk about a little bit about customers running Microsoft applications on Nutanix. And this is important because you want to see real use cases. So look at Bauer Built, where they had a data set rack space requirement where it fell from 42 U's to 7 U's. And that essentially gave them carving out complex data cubes on BI tool for 40% faster. Again, something that you can really consolidate your platform on. That's the difference between having 3-tier architecture and Nutanix, which is hyper-converged. Fitness First, rapid deployment and linear deployment of Windows Azure Pack. They use Windows Azure Pack as the self-service, and they essentially deploy their Nutanix blocks linearly as they need more, and then they have the self-service platform, Windows Azure Pack, so they can have for their end customers. For example, JBall, they running Exchange, really large workloads of Exchange on Nutanix, and they're getting to the point where they don't need those additional DAGs and need those additional space to be used because the underlying resilience is actually just enough. Another customer that's running Exchange is like in all their business critical apps is Hyundai. Another marquee customer that's looking at Nutanix and using that as for their scale for their future. And let's talk about additional resources. We have lots of resources online. If you go to www.nutanix.com/Microsoft, we have lots of RAs and reference architecture docs on Exchange and SQL and SharePoint, etc. If you do go to portal.nutanix.com, this is where we have all those tools that I'd mentioned in the previous slide, about like SCVMM plugins and SCOM plugins, etc. We also have software documentation on how to install or administrate Hyper-V. You can also go to the Nutanix Bible online at nutanixbible.com. And then if you have any questions around Microsoft that couldn't answer in this video or slide deck or even at the site, email microsoft@nutanix.com with any of your questions, and someone will definitely get back to you. I want to thank you again today for joining this webinar. My name is Robert Cordini. I'm the manager of Alliance Engineering, and thank you again today.